This is an overview of the Excel One project, so let me just walk you through the finished project so you can see what's involved, and then if you need individual tips on how to do any of these skills, I'll post those as well. Here we go. I think this is one of my favorite types of projects because it's really easy to understand, but it's got a lot of really useful skills involved with it. So let me show you how it works. What we have is our lookup worksheet. And what that lets you do is put a code in here, and then it goes to this music worksheet, and it finds the code, and then it returns all this information. So you can see here's a code EU2021. If I put that in here, EU2021, everything changes, and it brings up all this information. It changes the chart. So if you had data like thousands of records, like I do sometimes with graduate admissions, thousands of people applying, and I want to look up somebody, I can type in their U number and it will bring up all their information so I don't have to search through a big list. So that's the idea behind it. So let me just show you some of the features of the project. You're going to import this data or copy and paste this data from a Word file into this worksheet, and this is where all your data is. And then you're going to do some wrapping here so that your cells look like this, and even if I make this wider, it's going to stay wrapped. You're going to sort the data, and then you're going to name it. So you're going to make this whole worksheet a named range, which means you can refer to it as just one name instead of having to put the cell references in. And then you're going to use some conditional formatting, which is going to highlight all of the music selling for $9 or more. And again, if this changes, if suddenly this value is $7, the formatting is going to change as well. So you're going to use conditional formatting, some sorting, named ranges, and some text wrapping. And then we're not going to add any other formulas or any other data to this worksheet. The next part is just creating your lookup. So you're going to make it look like this. These are all just labels I've typed in on this side in column B. This is just a title that's been merged and centered across all the data, and I have a comment there, so if you hover over the cell you get the comment. And this is a date formula that changes every time I open it. That can be a useful formula to know, so we'll use that. And then these are all VLOOKUPs for the most part. These are VLOOKUPs, and so VLOOKUP formulas look at this value, jump to the music table, find this value, and return one element of the data into each one of these cells. And then there's some calculations in here. The cost and the selling price you're going to grab right from the table. The markup is the difference between the selling price and the cost. The markup percent is that difference based on the cost, so how much it's been increased based on the cost. How many have sold for date, how many were sold in 2015. We want to increase it by 15%. So then we have to figure out the new goal, and then how many units are needed to sell to meet the new goal. And then if you've already met the goal, as we have with EU 5031, you're going to get a little message that pops up here. You're going to get a 0, not a negative number, but a 0, and then a message that pops up. So these two cells are done using if statements. So that's the main part. Let me see if I've missed anything. Oh, and then we do a chart based on the year-to-date sold, 2015 sold, the goal, and the units needed to be sold. And then there's just some formatting in here, and the title changes when the code changes. And then there's just a couple of pivot tables, and pivot tables are just ways of looking at a big block of data, like the music data, and kind of slicing and dicing or looking at it from different perspectives. So they're really super simple to do, and I had this contact at JP Morgan Chase who once told me he would never hire anyone who didn't know how to create pivot tables. So I started incorporating them into our projects. I have one pivot table that's just based on the events and then their average selling price. Another one that's the grade level. The music is graded difficulty, and then how many were sold in 2015 and how many have been sold to date. And then it creates a chart. You can create a chart from that, a pivot chart. And then the third one is one that you can just make up yourself. And then filtering is something else that's super easy to do, and I use all the time when I'm at a meeting and someone's asking for some specific data, because I work with data that's like, I don't know, probably 50 columns and 10,000 rows. And somebody says, well, what about, in this example, what about everything that starts with brass? Or what about everybody who comes from a certain country? Or all of that can be done through filtering, so you can answer questions on the fly. It's just really a useful thing. And also, I'll just show this to you before you watch the tip on it. Down at the very bottom of your screen, I don't know if you can see it. Let me move it up a little bit. But you can set it up so that you can have summary information here. And so like if I want to get the summary, like the selling price, I can click on that after it's filtered. It tells me the average, the count, and the sum. So that can be useful too if you're, here I'll do it year to date, units sold. Again, the average, the count, and the sum. So this summary information along with filtering can be pretty useful. And you do a couple of filters, and then the third one you make up yourself. And let me see what else. Finishing up. Okay. On this VLOOKUP, you can use the if error, which is a really useful thing to start incorporating into some of your spreadsheets as you get more sophisticated. And what this does is, if you type in a code that doesn't exist, usually all of this would give you some kind of error message because it can't find it, it can't divide, it can't do anything with it because there's no data. But if you use the if error and you type in a code that doesn't exist, you can set it up so that it says code not found for the title and puts that on the chart, and then displays blanks for everything else. I left this as a 15% because this isn't being pulled or calculated, it's just there. But you could even use an if statement here that says something like, if this is blank, or if C7 is code not found, then display nothing. You could do that too, and that would be a nice thing as well. But you don't have to, but you can. So that's the if error. So watch the tip on that if you don't know how to do that. And then the last thing is protecting your worksheet. And so this is kind of a neat thing. You can see I can change this value, this cell, but if I go any other cell on this worksheet, I get a message that it's protected. So that's kind of nice when you have a complex worksheet and you don't want someone to change a formula or do something to it by mistake. You can block out a whole group of cells and say these can't be changed. That's pretty much the whole project. Some other notes on what to look for before you submit it, some formatting details, but that's the whole project.